good to have you with us on the 9 p.m. edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, we are having a conversation, decoding all aspects of the India-China clash, the history, the strategic importance of what India was doing, why China has done this, what really went on late last night, and the way forward from here on, with the biggest of the experts joining us in the special broadcast to answer our 10 key questions. Now, I just want to tell our viewers who are tuning in right now, we have lost one army officer, 2 other soldiers in a violent clash that unfolded between the Indian and the Chinese side in the Galwan Valley, in the Galwan area of Ladakh, and this was a result of a de-escalation process, an exercise of de-escalating which would entail that the Chinese pull back their soldiers. But instead of doing that, last evening, around 7 p.m., instead of doing that, they turned around and attacked our side. And the officer who was there to oversee the de-escalation process was attacked. His troops then responded, leading to an ugly clash between the two sides. No guns were used. The most brutal way of fighting and hitting and killing, stones and clubs, sticks and poles. That's what the Chinese used, viewers, to attack our side. The MEA has issued a statement saying that the Chinese unilaterally tried to change status quo and went against what was agreed upon on the June 6th meeting that took place between the two sides, and it was agreed that we will now diffuse the situation. That process then began in a few days, but unfortunately, this is what it has come down to right now. As we speak, conversations are on to try and diffuse the situation. But we want to understand and analyze just how we reached here. And for the viewers who haven't really tracked what's happened so far, let me tell you how it all began. This round, our face-off with China actually began in the month of May. It began on May 5th, where the first round of scuffle happened between the soldiers of the two sides at Pagangso. Thereafter, there was subsequent increase in the number of soldiers being deployed in that area and along the LAC in Ladakh, and specifically in the Galwan zone as well. The Chinese troops closed in on finger 2 of the Pagangso. Then we spotted their helicopters doing the rounds in that zone. Despite the fact that the army chief visited the Leh base on May 23rd, situation wasn't really diffusing. It took a series and rounds of conversation. It took major general rank level talks that happened on June 2nd and foreign joint secchi level talks that happened on June 5th for some amount of de-escalation talks to begin. But what happened last night was not de-escalation. What happened last night was betrayal by our neighbor. What happened last night was most unfortunate. The Indian side has given it back to the point that there have been casualties on the other side. But what happens next? That's the big question. And just how deep is this problem and how serious is the problem? That's our question. Before I go across to our other panelists, I quickly want to go across to a journalist who's actually been tracking this story very, very closely since May 5th. Manu Pubby of Economic Times is with us. Manu, the build-up was several weeks. You know, the government, while insisted that there was no transgression from the Chinese side, the satellite imagery did show a significant build-up. But what have you learned right now from your sources about what happened last evening?
Firstly, I think the government has been very quiet on this, but they have not ever denied transgression. In fact, the denial has come from journalists and analysts, not from the government itself. What happened last night was very tragic. We had been doing talks and we were on the right trajectory in terms of resolving the situation. And one point was that, there's a particular petrol point in Galwan, which is firmly inside our territory. The Chinese had been sitting for a while. So as part of the disengagement, they were to vacate that place and go back. which they did. Though at that time, when our soldiers went there to monitor this withdrawal, there seemed to be some kind of a clash which erupted. These soldiers have been sitting there for more than 6 weeks. A lot of tempers are running high. So this clash took place on the Indian side of the LAC. There's a fast-flowing river there, and I think a lot of soldiers got injured. Some of them got washed away in the river, and we seem to have lost a lot of people. In fact, official numbers have still not come in, but the numbers are scary. People are talking about anywhere from 12 to 15 people or soldiers dead on the Indian side. The Chinese have not revealed the casualties yet. We have to see what they come up with. But the official statement by the ME making it very clear that the Chinese were the aggressor. Yesterday evening, they tried to come on the Indian side of the LAC. They tried to violate the status quo, and they worked against all the preceding talks that have happened for disengagement on the line of actual control.
Okay, and like you said, and many have reported, including you, that our injured soldiers that are there, those casualties may go up, the death toll may go up, and which is really, really serious. It just goes on to show just how ugly this clash was. Is there an expectation of any kind of statement or comment today, Manu, from the army? Because the MEA statement obviously is silent on that aspect.
Yeah, I've been trying to track that since morning. We still haven't got a statement yet, but we are still hopeful that some statement comes through. But what we learned from our sources is that this clash has been bad. It is almost unprecedented. We have not seen such a thing happening since 1967, perhaps. The last clash was 1975, but in which only 4 soldiers on the Indian side were killed. But this, in which the numbers are speculated to be definitely in the 2 figures, and with some reports of them still being missing, is quite an unacceptably high number on the line of actual control. And especially so because, as you said earlier, no shots were fired as far as the army is saying, and it was stones and sticks which were used, and the fast-flowing river, terrain is very dangerous there. To reach this point where the clash happened, the Indian army, for example, is to cross the river 4 to 5 times, and each crossing is a danger in itself. What I believe is that the clash, a part of it at least, happened in the middle of the fast-flowing river, and there even a blow which would not be fatal could turn out to be death, because you get flown away, you get swept away in the river. In fact, some of the bodies were recovered much downstream the Ashok River, and this area has been, you have to think of the psyche of troops who are there in the border right now. 6 months, harsh terrain, 14,500 feet plus. They have been in a very intense conflict. It is psychologically difficult, to handle such a thing. And they have been coming to blows in the past. There has been a clash here about a month ago also. So any small thing can trigger off something big. That's why it is so dangerous to have so many troops. Remember, India has about China has about 6,000 to 7,000 troops. India has a larger number in the general area. And the fear is that if this is not resolved quickly, tempers are running high. The troops who are posted there would be very, very upset with what's happened to their colleagues, to their soldiers, to their brothers. And I think we need to now bring in some restraint or maybe some higher level intervention to ensure this doesn't go on.
Oh, yes. As far as the soldiers on ground are concerned, what has happened to their colleagues, to their leaders, is going to lead to a lot of anger. And like Manu was pointing out, the buildup of troops on both sides has been significant in the last 6 odd weeks. The fact that India had to boost our own presence and move in additional soldiers that we have, despite the fact that it's time of a pandemic, even, but because China was building up, brought in 5,000 soldiers to begin with along the LAC. There were reports of transgressions, and then there was heavy duty deployment along the LAC. They brought in their artillery, they brought in their infantry combat vehicles. We saw their choppers doing the rounds and jets doing the rounds. And so the Indian side also did build up. And now we are staring at a situation where there is a lot of tension there. But before we speak about that, I actually want to ask one basic question to our expert panelists. And let's say good evening to our expert panelists who are also joining us right now. Shilkant Sharma, former Indian ambassador, former Indian diplomat, joins us this evening. Major General Ashok Mehta, also with us this evening. Good evening to you. And Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, good evening. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. General Kulkarni, let's begin with you. One question that will be difficult, one point that will be difficult for a layman to understand is the way this clash took place. Why was it stones and sticks and clubs or poles? Why wasn't it guns that were used in this face-off?
I must firstly say absolutely shocking, unprecedented, something which should not have happened, and you cannot have such a violent clash when for years together we've been talking to each other. I myself conducted border personnel meetings. We've had wonderful relationships so far, but yes, China seems to convey a message. I can only say over here, if what has happened is an aberration at the local level, it can still be controlled by talks. But if what has happened has been orchestrated from the top, then we must be ready for the consequences. Because we have to make China realize it's not easy. It is not a country of 1962. It is not an army which can be pushed over. China will have to face consequences for what it has done. Having just said that, yes, I again would reiterate, should what has happened is an aberration because of maybe language not understood, or maybe some, a little hot-headed person decided to do it. But that also doesn't seem to, because it was a de-escalation which was in place. And the de-escalation, for monitoring the de-escalation, you find that it has escalated to a level where it is impossible now to see. How can the troops see that their commanding officer has been killed? Not one shot fired, we keep saying, since 1967. But this is not the way. The Chinese must be shown their place. The Chinese respect strength. We cannot negotiate from a point of weakness. We have to negotiate from a position of strength. We must hold our ground. If push comes to shove, if required, we must keep our gunpowder dry. Remember, capability building, capacity building takes time. Chinese are none or nobody for that matter to tell us what we should do on our side of the LAC. They cannot just unilaterally come and say, all this is the way the LAC is drawn. It is not done. I'm surprised how the Chinese have behaved. Of course, what they have been doing over the years is quite evident. It was, I think, such kind of physical clashes is also not required. You have mandatory protocols in place. Since 93 year peace and tranquility agreement. All of it has been revised and bettered with every visit and the protocols being made. Today you find that such a thing happening when there are protocols, there are banner drills. This kind of a thing is not expected. This is not acceptable, and this must be clearly conveyed. However much China may be on the back foot economically within its own country, it can be bad in Hong Kong, it may be on the back foot of Wuhan crisis, it may be on the back foot of the WHO investigation, but you cannot, as soldiers, behave like this. It's something ridiculous. This is absolutely not acceptable. And once we convey it to China, it's not acceptable, you will find Chinese will not repeat. Chinese don't want a military confrontation. If that must be understood. They know it, that should they get into a military confrontation, the kind of shame that China has faced in Vietnam, they would have to face it over here. And if that they are willing to do, then China is maligned the world over. They can forget about wanting to be a big power in Asia. They would not be able to stand at this point of time. I personally regret why China should be doing such a thing. And having said that, it is time that we must stand firm. We must not be able to compromise on any issues whatsoever.
Okay, no, I understand what you're saying. I understand the sentiment for sure, General, from about what you're talking about. But if I can also bring in Major General Ashok Mehta on this. General Mehta, the fact that there have been reports of transgressions in the Chinese entering our territory for a while now, the fact that there's been troop build-up from both sides, but we tried to resolve the situation via dialogue. We tried to de-escalate via using all other methods that were available. And this is how they've responded. Now, I am still trying to wrap my head around the fact of how is it that a de-escalation exercise turns into an attack on the Indian side. Now, are there no basic rules to how the military is supposed to behave with each other on ground?
Well, first of all, we have to understand that for the last 6 weeks, the government of India has not put out an official statement, a proper detailed statement of what has been going on the line of actual control stretching from Sikkim to Daulat Beg Oldie. That's the first point. The second point relates to the fact that we are dealing with a macro picture in which the Chinese, for the first time, have done something that they have never done before. And that is to have come in at multiple places in substantive strength and across the line of actual control. So this is not a localized incident. This is a highly planned incident of multiple intrusions where the sanction has been provided by the highest political authority, which is the president himself, Xi Jinping. The third point that needs to be made is that amongst these strategic enclaves where these intrusions have been made, the most significant, as we say in the army, the ground of strategic importance is the Galwan River Valley. Unfortunately, according to other experts and media reports, the Chinese have been able to create a diversion by taking the focus towards the finger area of the Spangur Lake. That is the least important area. The most significant area is the Galwan River Valley, the floor of the valley, as well as the commanding heights. And this Galwan River Valley is not important today. It has been important since 1961 and 62. In the 62 war, one of the first posts the Chinese PLA demolished was the post on top of the Galwan Heights. Now, why Galwan is important? The Galwan River Valley is important because the river flows, the Galwan River flows into the Ashok River. Across the Ashok River is our strategic highway from Darpur, Ashok to Daulat Beg Oldie. Daulat Beg Oldie is the jewel in the crown as far as the terrain is concerned. It's the strategic, most valued real estate for India because there you can land your globe masters. The Chinese have now, as part of the intrusions, plonked themselves at the confluence of the river Galwan and the Ashok Valley. And they are sitting there. The disengagement that was negotiated was, in my view, only partial. And we misunderstood this disengagement. And the misunderstanding is evident from the fact that last Saturday, 4 days ago or 3 days ago, the Chief of Army Staff at the IMA passing out parade in response to a question said that disengagement is taking place in a phased manner. He added that lots of disengagement has taken place from the Galwan River Valley. Well, factually, that is not correct. The Chinese only moved back from the confluence to a limited extent because, as they have said today in a statement from a spokesperson of the Western Theatre Command, that Galwan Valley belongs to us. So you have this situation where the Chinese may pull back, from one or two intrusions, but are not going to pull back from the
Okay.
Galwan River bank. And lastly, the point about this Stone Age fighting amongst troops, well, this is part of the very flawed border protocols. We have now resorted to unarmed combat, which end in murderous brawls. The details of this particular brawl
Yes.
is not known. There is a Chinese version. The Chinese are saying Indian troops crossed over on our side twice. The Indian side is saying that our patrol led by the colonel was only monitoring the withdrawal. So unless the government of India comes out with a statement, and it has made no statement in the last 6 weeks, bits and scrawls here and there, we've not had. Even today, the MES statement is a bit apologetic. It starts with, believe it or not, in response to a question. The MES should have made a suo motu statement castigating the Chinese action. Instead of that, we have a rather feeble statement prefaced by...
That's actually very interesting, General Mehta, what you said, that it's not a statement by itself as should have been in a situation like this, in an ugly situation like this, where a country needs to take a stand. It's more about responding to the media queries. That's how the statement begins. You're very right there. If I can just bring in Mr. Shilkan Sharma as well on this, because what General Mehta was talking about was this Galwan area and the crucial road that we are building on our side, the bridge that is being built. And what is interesting is, Mr. Sharma, that China is building a huge amount of infrastructure on their side. You know, all along the LAC, and I'm not even restricting myself to the Aksai chain of the Ladakh region, but everywhere else as well. But when it comes to what India is doing, they're very, very quick to object and then to resort to these kind of tactics, isn't it?
Well, can you hear me? Hello, do you hear me?
Yes, I can. Go ahead, please.
You know, the Chinese style has been that in a negotiation, whatever they claim is theirs. By claim itself, it becomes theirs. And what is ours, they contest. Now, this kind of a negotiating style is, is vintage China. Second, in response to the question about why we did not say anything, I think Indian setup must be shocked beyond belief, because just last night, when the disengagement process was on, suddenly they come with cloak and not dagger, but cloak and stones and start attacking. Nobody would have expected this kind of a thing, in a diplomatic process. So, and it has taken time to realize what they have done. Third point is that Chinese claim about Galwan, as has been explained by the previous speakers, goes back, but it has never been, a live issue since '62. So they are now trying to do this, try to make that area of the border very live and full of, very dangerous prognosis. The Chinese negotiating tactic is what is coming out to be very evident here. It is premeditated, and I for one don't believe that this is a spontaneous local affair. It seems to come all the way from Beijing, and as has been explained, copious times, and probably earlier also in your discussion, that Chinese today feel very confident. They feel that, they have arrived in the world. They are the numero uno. And because the US is bogged down in its own problems. And so they are now flashing their sword all over the place. And so this is what they choose to do in India. I mean, this border is remote from China. and Indians have done nothing to disturb the status quo. But they go out of their way to blame us for disturbing the status quo, which is a lie. So this is again deception and
Yes.
lie and ambiguity. This is the Chinese diplomatic style.
Yes.
And our problem is that
Well, Mr.
we
Sharma,
ourselves, yeah.
Mr. Sharma,
Yeah,
I will come back to you in just a bit, just to let you also know, I think by mistake you've switched off your video connection, so we're not able to see your video. If you may want to fix that. If I can just go back to Manu Pubby meanwhile. Manu, while we've said that, largely the government has been silent on these transgressions, there have been several reports about the extent of it, the extent that the Chinese soldiers perhaps entered our territory. What is it that you have learned and reported so far?
See, there are two things which are very clear. They have been clear from day one. At two places, like the Major General Mehta said earlier, in Galwan Valley, which is strategically very important, that in that area, the Chinese soldiers have come in between 3 to 5 kilometers inside Indian territory. They have set up camps in areas which were not disputed in the past, in areas which Indian side would patrol in the past. Second thing that we know for sure is that at Pangong So Lake, they have set up a camp at Finger 4, which is effectively cut off a 50 square kilometer area. Again, this area was disputed, but claimed by both sides, but we were patrolling there. The other point I want to bring on, which General Kulkarni was earlier saying, about this being so difficult. See, remember this clash when it took place today. This is not a spontaneous, it is a spontaneous clash, but there's a huge difference between the Indian and the Chinese militaries. The Indian army is a very professional army. They have been engaged in operations in a lot of areas. They are familiar with stressful situations. The Chinese, not so much. They have never seen action or not seen action for a long time. So I would imagine that this action has been perpetrated by the Chinese side. A response has to be given. I would imagine our side would have been the cooler head in this whole exercise, and the Chinese, the provocation. And they did it earlier, of course, by invading our territory in Galwan and in the Pangong So Lake.
Yes, and the last time when there was a face-off and it actually got physical on one of these scuffles that took place, Manu, and unfortunate that a series of videos were leaking from both sides to really show what went on. But the fact of the matter is that it does get very ugly, irrespective of the fact that guns are not being used. But when those videos that had emerged the last time showed just how ugly it became, the large number of soldiers that came in from the Chinese side and the way they attacked.
You see, it's very clear from ground reports as well as the videos and photographs that the Chinese have been extremely brutal in these encounters in the past few days. They're armed with spiked sticks. They throw stones. They come in huge numbers. So if you have 50 soldiers, they come with 250. They come with the intention to hurt you. And I think the Indian stance has been that let's resolve this peacefully, let's stay away. But their posturing has been very aggressive. The way they brought in 6,000 to 7,000 troops almost overnight, it all portrays a very aggressive posturing. And as the generals would tell you, the Indian army is more than prepared to handle any such situation. They are a very professional army. They've sweated it out. They have battled. They have done exercises. So it's not as if the Indian army is any pushover. But yes, the ferocity the Chinese challenge this time has surprised, I think, everyone, down from the ground up to policymakers.
Absolutely. In fact, when we were doing a bit of our research, we came across what happened in 2013, General Kulkarni, where China actually attempted to carry out some part of their own construction, which was legitimately our end of the territory. They had a heavy troop deployment there. Even then, the report suggested that the troops had entered as far as 19 kilometers on the Indian side of the line of actual control. And that stalemate went on for several weeks as well. But even then, we didn't see this kind of a clash unfold. Where do we go from here on? How do we pull back when clearly in this case we agreed to pull back, but the Chinese didn't?
What you just spoke about 2013, I must remind you, in 1999, when I was in Arunachal Pradesh at Yangtze, A similar face-off which had happened at Doklam for a duration of 75 days has occurred over there. Even then, we were eyeball to eyeball. We never ever, physical, yes, sometimes push, jostling, okay, but never a violent this thing. In 2013, also, the Prime Minister of theirs was to visit us, and it got finally resolved. 2015, again, President Xi was to visit. The same thing happened. It got resolved. 2017, Doklam. 2018, Wuhan, which resulted in ensuring that such kind of clashes must not take place. They are responsible nations, they are old civilizations, and these kind of things are not acceptable, and talks will proceed before any actions are taken place. What do you find over here? Chinese are a firm believer and followers of the Sun Tzu dictum that believes that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without a fight. Chinese know that military confrontation with India is not feasible. They can have any number of troops, but the application of it is not easy at all. Even when you're talking about Galwan, even if Galwan is one where even the river which comes and joins Ashok, and from Darbuk when you're going up Galwan, and we were going to Galwan earlier, not the road that you're following today, we'll be going up the Sesarla. So there are various ways. Chinese know for sure that they cannot. And the Chinese cannot bully us. Chinese know that India is in a position of strength, and they're trying to convey, and they're conveying a message is not just to India. They're trying to convey to the world that don't think that we have lost the battle. Don't think we are not the center of the universe. They're messaging, and this messaging somewhere, I hope I'm proved right, somewhere down the chain that this is a local aberration which has taken place. If it's a local aberration which has taken place for lack of knowledge, language, understanding, or hot-headedness of some of the Chinese troops, acceptable. It could still be resolved by talks. But again, as I say, if it is orchestrated from the top, a green signal given from the top, then I don't think any kind of statement, and there should be no letting up. They must stand firm. They must be able to keep up powder dry. Talks, yes, but not from a position of weakness, from a position of strength.
Okay, General Mehta, you wanted to make a point? Go ahead, please.
Make several points. The first point is that what is happening in 2020 cannot be compared to what has happened in the past. That is, the geopolitical context has changed, and the geopolitical context is changed after Home Minister Amit Shah made the statement in Parliament last year that we will retake BOK and Aksai Chin and a number of other activities that the government of India has done, which has annoyed the Chinese, not to mention the Indo-Pacific, not to mention Quad, not to mention joining the group that is accusing the Chinese about the Wuhan virus. So this entire orchestration of multiple intrusions is completely different. The pattern is different, the violence is different, the strategy is different. And therefore, we were caught off guard in this instance. Clearly, we were caught off guard for the last 6 weeks. We are the second responder. They moved in first, and we are now reacting to what they have done. The disengagement that we have succeeded, or we imagine we have succeeded in orchestrating, is cosmetic. The Chinese are not going to withdraw. The Chinese are following the policy of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. What do I mean by that? Through these multiple intrusions, they will withdraw from the finger area, they may withdraw from the hot springs, but they will stay at the Galwan River Valley area. And these negotiations at the level of the military have not succeeded. The military dialogue will not succeed. This dialogue has to move up. It has to move to the highest level in the government of India. I do not know why in our statement we have not been more proactive, why we have not directly accused the Chinese of this betrayal during disengagement. And therefore, as far as the government of India is concerned, the choices are very limited. You know, it's all very well to say that we must act from a position of strength. I mean, how do you translate that? You translate that by doing two things. One is you evict the post that the Chinese have established in Galwan, or you do a tit for tat. You go and sit in one or two places across the line of actual control. Then you can bargain with them. Then you are in a position of strength. But for both these options, the use by date is over. It's too late. They have already the advantage of intrusion, preparation, and consolidation. And therefore, unfortunately, for the Indian Army, the only option, the choice available now is to continue with this disengagement and ensure that the Chinese are not able to bludgeon their way in that disengagement. We have to be equally armed with those.
Well, I agree with you on this one point, General Mehta, that the only way forward has to be disengagement. I completely agree with you on that, but how? That's the question. Mr. Sharma, would you like to comment on that? For several days and weeks, there was complete silence on the government's end as report after report emerged about these alleged transgressions, allegedly how deep the Chinese soldiers had made it into our territory. And we didn't see a clear statement, acknowledging that from our end. But clearly from the statement today, it is obvious that this incident has happened on our soil, which means the Chinese did enter our territory, which is where this happened. Now, where do we go from here then?
I think MEA has said that they have not conformed to the agreement reached about disengagement. So already the matter is now at the diplomatic level. And I think so far India did not raise it to a level above from the local military commanders, or with the view to keeping it contained. I suppose that must have been thought out by the government. But today the time has come that it has to be raised. I generally find General Ashok Mehta's point quite logical, that disengagement has to go, but probably the level has to be risen from the from the local to the slightly higher level, because otherwise the hash they made of the yesterday's disengagement process actually puts paid to the local commanders behaving, at least on the Chinese side. So how do you ensure that their behavior next time is not that treacherous? So for that reason also it has to go up at a higher level. I think that seems to be the only way. And the Ministry of External Affairs has also said that they are committed to resolving it through a dialogue. So the idea is not to escalate, but to de-escalate. So I think the diplomatic, the cards are fairly clear. Now, how the Chinese will respond, it depends. The way their statements are coming out from Foreign Office and Global Times, they don't inspire much confidence. Actually, this not agreeing to the disengagement process, which was agreed on 6th of June, is itself confidence shattering. And for a diplomatic process, you have to build confidence and build it incrementally. But Chinese don't seem to conform to any laws at the moment. They seem to be really very imperial. They don't correspond to any laws. They don't agree previous agreements. They don't even say where they are committed. This whole process of the last several decades. And I find that this special representatives process, they have not deliberately made any progress, because if they do something, then there'll be a commitment. So they are keeping everything open, and and increasing the ante whenever they get a chance. So this kind of a situation cannot be resolved probably at a local level at this juncture. So it has to be taken up at a higher level. This is
No,
what
I
my
think
intuitive feeling is.
oh, we have gone far, far beyond a solution at the local level completely, and I think all of our panelists will agree to that. We are far beyond that. The sheer audacity of this attack, this incident by China, the sheer brutality of what has happened there, the details are awaited officially from the government and the army, and I hope they come sooner than later on what happened and exactly the extent of the damage that has happened. For far too many weeks and days now, viewers, we've not been given a clear indication. First, it was about the extent of the Chinese transgression, the extent of how much they had come into our territory, if they had. Then about the kind of build-up that began on both sides. Tension and tempers are running high on both sides right now because of the build-up, because of what China began over there. And India had no option but to respond, but to strengthify our end and our forte. But it has gone beyond the conversations at the Joint Secretary level, the agreements that happened between the two nations, between the generals, as well as between the diplomats about a de-escalation that has yielded into 3 deaths on our side. At least that's what we know so far. And we await more information. Suffice to say, soldiers have been injured right now in this clash that went on for several hours last evening right up to midnight. Some more clarity from the government is expected, and this is going to be a difficult one to handle. And I'm not speaking militarily, I'm speaking diplomatically. As a nation, how we choose to respond to China is going to be very, very critical. Any kind of de-escalation from here on and pull back could take months together. But we shouldn't give up and give in to what is our territory. We are told repeatedly, this isn't that country. This is the new age 2020 India, which will not give in to any kind of bullying. If that is what it is, then let's see what the government's reaction will be to this. A big thank you to all of our panelists for joining us, for answering our 10 basic questions. Like I promised you at the beginning of this special broadcast, the only intention was to give you information, to cover all aspects from the line of actual control, to the history, to the transgressions, to the build-up, to the attempts that have been made to reduce the tension, diffuse the situation, to the projects that have been initiated by Chinese on their end and the Indians on our side to really understand what's going on. Mirror Now will not resort to chest thumping or warmongering. Mirror Now will continue to get you facts on the India-China clash. Thank you for joining us. Viewers, Mirana was the channel to tell you that there are states right now in our country which have a discrepancy in their COVID death records. We were the first ones to tell you yesterday that the Maharashtra government has admitted to this discrepancy and promised us that the correction will be made. True to that promise, the government has reconciled its data. The exercise that began a few days is over, and here is the big part. For the state of Maharashtra, the reconciliation of data has led to over 1,300 deaths being added. Now we have about 5,500 deaths in the state of Maharashtra. In the city of Mumbai itself, the data correction has registered 862 additional deaths, ones that were not being counted earlier due to COVID. Disha got that story for us with the updated numbers. Disha, a rise in the death toll for the state and for the city of Mumbai. Obviously, a lot of it coming in because of the data correction that happened.
Well, certainly, Tanvi, in simple terms, we can really say that over 1,300 deaths were not reported in the last couple of days, is what we can say. To put it in a simple manner, in the city of Mumbai alone, 862 deaths were not reported, and these deaths we are talking about the COVID-19 deaths. They were being listed under the non-COVID deaths, and in the rest of Maharashtra, 466 deaths were underreported. So if you combine both the figures here, Tanvi, almost 1,328 deaths were underreported by the medical bulletin that we actually get on a daily basis by the Maharashtra state government. So, of course, this death data discrepancy, this was the topic subject which was, on for a debate for a very, very long time. In fact, the Chief Secretary of the Maharashtra had also ordered all the municipal commissioners and the district collectors to reconcile the data till 15th of June. And that is something, of course, that, was prepared, and we found that 1,300 plus deaths were not being reported. Now, going forward, of course, Tanvi, the next step of action by the Maharashtra government is to probe this entire matter, because, of course, Mirror Now was the first one to bring this entire story, that how there was a death discrepancy that was reported, how the numbers are being underreported, how the COVID-19 cases were being listed under the non-COVID deaths. So now an entire probe will be, initiated against the officers who have been concerned with this entire, death recording data, and a similar action will be taken.
All right, Disha, thanks so much for joining us. And here Maharashtra making the guideline very clear that even if there are deaths due to other conditions, but if the patient was COVID and that triggered their other health condition, then we must factor that in and not be in denial of what actually triggered the death in this case. Disha, thanks so much for bringing us this story. Let's also quickly get you an update on the other big story that we were tracking today. Of course, despite the fact that the big face-off with China and the news of the injuries and the deaths grabbed the headlines, Prime Minister Modi did hold a meeting with the chief ministers of all states. It's a two-day virtual meeting that's going on to discuss the COVID situation and the steps to be taken from here on. Ayushman is with me. Ayushman, of course, a big message from the Prime Minister, full of optimism, saying that the economy is also showing some green shoots, and the fact that we were the first to respond and bring in a lockdown has helped us in our battle. What about the states? What is it that the states have to say?
Well, Tanvi, the states did discuss about the situation that is there in unlocking 1.0 that we are witnessing currently, because these were the states, Tanvi, where the number of cases was relatively low as you compare it to other states. Tomorrow there is a meeting where large number of cases are there, and those states will be interacting with the Prime Minister. But the states clearly, given the focus on was on the economic activities resumption, and that was what echoed in Prime Minister's address as well. And most importantly, the states were told that they cannot lower their guards right now, because currently the states have to be on vigil. The containment measures, the face mask, and also the social distancing norm needs to be followed in the state if they want to continue this low number.
Okay, all right, Ayushman. Thanks so much for joining us and bringing us that story. Well, let's move on, viewers, and get you a similar story from two different cities, two metros, both metros struggling with high number of cases, struggling with a shortage of beds and ventilators, and both metros have actually seen railway coaches being converted into makeshift centers and hospitals with beds and even oxygen cylinders. In Mumbai and in Delhi, in both places this has been done repeatedly. The railways comes out and tells us about how they're using these coaches and turning these coaches, and 500 and 5,000 of these coaches will be used for the cities. But unfortunately, despite the fact that in both of these cities this is ready, it's not really being used, and that's very, very interesting. So let's begin with the city of Delhi, where our reporter found out that 50 coaches that were given earlier are lying unused in just one area. Now, why is it that the government is actually running around from hotels to stadiums to banquet halls, but not using these rail coaches? That's the question that the government has to answer us, but take a look at this report.
Over 200 coaches are prepared for COVID patients, and these coaches are here at Anand Vihar railway station. My video journalist is showing you that how these coaches are prepared, and railway is now saying that Delhi government may take them at any time. But here you can see, I just want to show you that how it looks like from inside. This is the curtain. This is plastic curtain. If you go inside, these are two oxygen cylinder. Each coach will have two oxygen cylinder, and the patient can use them at any time. Definitely these coaches are for the asymptomatic or minor symptoms. Those patients are having minor symptoms, they will be allowed to stay here. These are the beds, and yes, definitely these are the berths which are now converted into the beds. And apart from that, this is the window, and this window is covered with these kinds of net. This net is there just to prevent the entry of any kind of insect. So this way, this whole preparation is done. Definitely, these are the dustbins are also there at all the seats if you go inside. So this way, the whole preparation is done. But the real challenge of this whole COVID isolation coaches, if we see that the heat, yes, definitely, because it is non-AC, and during the summer in Delhi, it is not easy to stay in these coaches. So definitely this will be one of the challenges for the patients who come here. Apart from that, if you talk about the railways, when the Delhi government will take them for further use, if you talk about the 50 coaches which are already given to the Delhi government, but Delhi government has not taken them over. At that time when there is a shortage of beds, despite that, Delhi government has not taken them. So that's what we are asking, that why the Delhi government has not taken them. And although, yes, there are more than 200 coaches are already prepared here. So when these coaches will be actually start and come in the use for the people, those who are affected due to COVID. With video journalist Ajaz Hussain, I am Alok for Mirror Now.
Similarly, viewers, in Maharashtra also we saw, while coaches have been prepared, the government is yet to ask for them and start using them again for a city like Mumbai, where there is a problem with beds and the government is building centers everywhere. One wonders why this is not being used. Take a look.
While Maharashtra is battling acute health crisis, with each day complaints being coming of people that they are not able to find a bed in the hospital, hospitals running with full bed capacity and ICUs, the railways had been given a task of converting some coaches into healthcare coaches. Now this task was given to each of the zones of railways way back in the month of May. Now, according to the information given to us by the Central and the Western Railway officials, almost close to 800 coaches were converted by them into hospital and healthcare facilities. While the Central Railway converted about 482 coaches, Western Railway did about 410 coaches. However, while these coaches have been ready and kept at respective depots, by mid-May itself, the railways tell us that the state government of Maharashtra has made no demand to use these coaches. so that patients can avail of these facilities. It's been almost more than a month now, and the state government has made no request to the railways to be able to use these coaches. While a response has been asked from the state government on this, it is still awaited. Why it is that the available facilities are not being provided to patients in the state and the city of Mumbai when it is the corona hotspot of the country. With camera person Ram, this is Neha for Mirror Now from Mumbai.
That is a wrap on this edition of Urban Debate. Thank you so much for joining us.